This is the Corvette ZR1X. It has 1250 horsepower, making it more powerful than the Ferrari F80. In fact, more powerful than any production Ferrari ever built. Corvette recently announced that this car, on a prepped surface but with standard road tyres, could do 0 to 60 in 1.68 seconds, cover the quarter mile in 8.6 at 159 miles an hour. It is faster than the Porsche 992 GT3 RS around the Nürburgring, and that's with an engineer driving it, whereas Porsche used ex-factory race driver Jörg Bergmeister, who's won his class at Le Mans and Daytona. And it costs from $207,395. Even in this spec with the ZTK package, high downforce, well under $250,000. That makes it probably the biggest performance bargain ever. But is it any good? Well, we're going to drive it on road, track and drag strip and find out if the ZR1X is as mad in reality as it sounds on paper. So Corvette's latest creation offers true hypercar performance for around the third of the price of, say, the Ferrari 849 Testarossa or Lamborghini Revuelto. And its engine alone makes more power than the total output of the hybrid Italian supercars. Maybe this is Corvette's GTR moment, redefining what's possible for mere sports cars. The ZR1X is a brilliant example of illogical logic. In simple terms, it marries the wide body, chassis and engine of the ZR1 with the electric front axle of the E-Ray, which sounds sensible, apart from the fact that nobody in their right mind drives a ZR1 and thinks it needs more power, more torque, more anything really, but that's where we've ended up. So in the back, the same 5.5 litre twin turbo V8, the LT7 engine, 1064 horsepower at 7,000 RPM, revs to over 828 foot-pounds of torque at 6,000 RPM. But apparently that's not enough, because on top of that, we have the electric front axle, so just a single electric motor, 186 horsepower, 145 foot-pounds of torque in addition. So we end up with an E4-wheel drive system. It's exactly the same hardware as in the E-Ray, but with improved management, they've managed to eke out an extra 20 horsepower. So the total is 1,250 horsepower. As well as all the driving modes, which we'll go through later, you end up with 3 strategies for the E4-wheel drive system. So endurance mode, you press a Charge Plus button in here, and that gives you maximum performance for a sustained period, if you like. So a full tank of fuel, which, what's that, 6 or 7 laps? I don't know, we're going to find out a bit later. There's also a qualifying mode, which gives you everything, full deployment for a short period. And then there's also a push to pass system where you can get maximum deployment at the push of a button. So there's a lot of complication in this car, but that is the very basics of what we're going to experience, which is fascinating. But let's take a closer look at some of the components that go into a 1,250 horsepower standard production Corvette. I need to keep saying that because it just doesn't really make sense. I'm going to actually start with something that's familiar from the ZR1. It's not unique to ZR1X, but anytime you get to see this LT7 on a stand, you should. It's such a cool engine. Huge power, obviously, and you can see why. These 76mm turbos hanging off the side are absolutely huge. No hot V here. I think you'd literally melt the block with those turbos. But yeah, what a motor. But let's move on because I've got some really cool components here. We've got the chassis cutaway, so you can see some of those components I was talking about already. Obviously, aluminium chassis, engine tucked nice and low into it. It's not low like a Ferrari 849 Testarossa where the engine looks like it's on the floor, but pretty low center of gravity. The central spine here, we can see that 1.9 kilowatt hour battery through what would have been a transmission tunnel in the old front engine rear-wheel drive cars. They kept this spine, this backbone, to keep the chassis nice and rigid. And then we've got the electric motor in the front. Effectively, there's an open differential, so the torque vectoring they talk about is torque vectoring by braking. But let's talk about the electric motor. I think I might have done it a disservice when I said it was exactly the same as the E-Ray, because everything around the motor has been strengthened for that higher torque output. And part of the reason they wanted to do that is because in the E-Ray, there's a disconnect at 150 miles an hour, but because this car, they were very keen on that quarter mile time and they knew it was going to bust well over 150, Now it disconnects at 160 miles an hour. So 8.6 seconds at 159, so it's bang on at the quarter mile. It's going to disconnect above 160. That means the top speed is basically the same, 233 miles an hour in the low drag car, more like 224, I think, in the high drag. This thing weighs 37 kilos, but obviously produces a huge amount of power, so it's really good. But what's interesting is the management of that motor. That's where the magic has been, is, as they said, an electric motor responds a lot more quickly than a massive great turbocharger on a V8. So blending when they use the electric motor has been really key in the middle of the corner and for traction. Now, if you run out of battery power, they keep enough that you've always got the four-wheel drive capability in the corner. What you lose is the boost down the straight. Okay, the brakes, absolutely huge, 10 piston at the front, 6 piston at the rear. They call this the J59 Brake Package. Stiff caliper with these bands, and you can see it's sort of asymmetric. It follows the shape of the inside of the wheel. Pad areas, much improved. 420mm discs front and rear, carbon ceramic, obviously. And here they talk a little bit about the modes: qualifying mode, endurance, and push to pass. Actually, for the Nürburgring, they couldn't use qualifying mode because it will run out in probably one lap of a 3.5 mile track. So they were in endurance mode, but then they used the push to pass. They modeled where they'd get the biggest advantage, basically in traction zones and long uphill sections, and that's how they achieved that lap time. Okay, last thing, tyres. The only Cup 2R that I've ever seen that's zero pressure, so a run flat tyre. They actually, you can see how thick the sidewalls are. They now use this capability not just for the run flat, but to actually tune the dynamics of the car. This thing can generate so much load that having the run flat construction is really, really helpful. You can also get a Pilot Sport 4S, but we're going to drive the cars on the track with the Cup 2R. So much information and clearly so much engineering rigour to bring the ZR1X to reality. But that's nothing compared to the modes and configurability available to the driver. Okay, this is more daunting than actually driving this car on the limit, I think. But let's cover the basics. For me, driving position in these C8 generations is always a little bit too high, but visibility is really good. I love the view into the intakes down the side. This strange square steering wheel, which people hate, I never find it that offensive. It's a little bit chunky for me, but this new look is much improved. You remember it used to have a long sort of waterfall of buttons down here that looked a bit weird and was quite hard to navigate your way around. Feels more screen heavy now, but also a lot cleaner. So we've got the central display screen, one to the right, and then a smaller one to the left. I'm not going to be able to explain everything that you can do because there's so much, but let's run through a little bit. The modes to start with. There's a weather mode, so that's going to back the suspension and throttle response way off and keep up the traction control as much as possible. So that's for heavy rain, etc. There's then Tour, which is sort of your everyday setting. Sport, which you'll probably hear the engine note hardens a little bit. Then to track. And you can obviously choose your own in My Mode. My Mode's quite nice because it's configurable, but it also latches to the ignition. So you can start the car and it will stay in My Mode. There's also Z Mode, which is on the steering wheel. That's your most extreme mode, if you like, which we'll probably be using on the track. The reason that's better than just having My Mode as all ramped up is you can also couple it to the Performance Traction Management System. So you get the information on this little screen on the left. You press a button, there's a row of 3 buttons just here below it, which is Performance Traction Management, Traction Control off, and the Launch Control, which is a little rocket button, which seemed fitting. But if I press Performance Traction Management, I can then run through the modes. Again, there's a wet mode, dry, sport, race 1, race 2, which knocks off the ESC altogether and still gives you just a little bit of traction control, and then there's a pro mode where everything is off absolutely, completely. There's much more, but I can't talk forever on this. There's a PDR, which is the onboard telemetry system, if you like. It will record your lap times, you can upload tracks, you can learn tracks, it can record your data, it can show it in telemetry form, and it can even coach you and analyze your best sectors, best lines, etc. Really cool system, actually. It's always a bit of a worry when you're driving a Corvette press car because they're always looking at that stuff. So if you hit a curb too hard, they know. Well, the performance settings are quite cool. First screen is power or torque, you can choose between them, of the electric motor and the engine. Then there's telemetry the last 15 seconds or 30 or a minute or 2 minutes, so you can see what the car's been doing. And then on this screen, there's various tiles. So let's click on the hybrid battery, for example. I can then, if I want to see the state of charge and I want to add it over here, I can add that to the driver display and it will pop up on the left here of the main screen, which is really, really cool. There's so much more. There's so many things to configure. Obviously the central display changes with the modes that you're in. So when you're in race mode, you've just got a lovely rev bar across the top, big speed display. It's massively complex in some ways, but it's quite intuitive to use. And I think very quickly, like a lot of these things, you would figure out what you need, what you like, and then you never touch it again. But the fact you can jump in it, start playing with the display, putting G-force or hybrid state of charge wherever you want on the dash is quite cool. Like the ZR1X in general, there's just a lot. There's a lot of everything, but it seems fairly easy to access. The question is if the performance, which there is a lot of, is easily accessible when you just jump in and drive on the track. And we're going to find that out right about now. Okay, first impressions. Familiar from the ZR1 is just the sheer amount of power. I mean, even more so. When you get up to 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 horsepower, I mean, it's all a lot. No sense immediately of steering corruption, which you could get with these e-axles sometimes. It hasn't really got that much power as compared to the rear, has it? 186 horsepower, but you can barely feel it's there. But the traction is mad, and when you get on the power, the acceleration, it's got this sort of free fall acceleration. That is proper hypercar levels. I'm in race 2 for the traction control, so that's just a bit of traction control. And I have to say, they're right. To be able to drive this car with minimal intervention and not feel worried about it at all is extremely impressive. And the traction's hardly helping at all, even out of those slow corners. Through the fast stuff, really extremely secure. It loves to snap between direction changes. I don't think it feels as light as 849 Testarossa, but it has way more traction and even more, I would say, performance, which sounds completely wild, doesn't it? Okay, gearbox. More of the same, really. It's not rabid and hugely exciting in the way of like an 849 Testarossa, but it's very, very good. Mid-collar balance is really good. There's no real vices to the car, which sounds nuts for something with so much performance. Tyres are getting hot, so suddenly it's a little bit more alive at the rear. But I can just jump on the power and it takes it all. Really impressive. You can brake really late. I'm not even getting close to the braking capacity actually. And then out of the corner I can just light the thing up. It's always the horsepower that gets the headlines with these new cars, but it's really how cohesive something like this can be with all this grunt and how exploitable that really blows your mind. Let's give it full beans, nothing, no intervention. Yeah, it just starts to feel a little bit heavier through the quick stuff, but we're going at a decent pace around here. I think the most amazing thing is it's not just, oh my god, this thing's fast. It's how can I get the power down a bit more cleanly? Wow, when you come out the corner and light those turbos up, Jesus. It's really impressive. Full power. Yes, that's nice. Like all of these cars, the cool thing is that when you turn off the stability control, it brings a new dimension to the car. And with all this power, you just have an ability to pick your line and actually impose yourself a little bit on the chassis. How you can continue to up the power in this C8 chassis configuration, but the whole car seems to level up with it. It's just not more power that corrupts the car. It seems to absorb it and be able to exploit it, deploy it, which is really good. Time is extremely tight on track, but the ZR1X makes a vivid, outrageous impression. The team constantly talk about traction digs, and there's no question the ZR1X gets out of turns like nothing else on these near-slick Cup 2Rs. But perhaps even better is that the front axle doesn't feel invasive during the cornering phases at all. It feels a little less agile than the ZR1, and it's a good 200 kilos heavier than, say, the Ferrari 849 Testarossa, but it's consistent, has superb body control, and takes curbs and fast direction changes with real composure. And you can attack rather than manage the massive performance available. It's a mighty thing. Just how mighty? We're about to find out. But first, let me put on a sexy little fireproof jacket. Yes, Corvette are very keen we try the ZR1X on Sonoma's drag strip. We've swapped cars now, and this one still features the carbon fibre aero pack, but with the Michelin PS4S tyres and the slightly softer suspension package that comes in non-ZTK track package cars. Even so, it seems unlikely we're about to break any records on such a cold day and with rain threatening in the distance. A burnout might help. Both paddles, release right paddle, hit white right again, off the brake, full power. Okay, that was a pretty decent one. Hopes up. 2.1 to 60. Okay, so 2.1 to 60, 4.2 to 100, 9.1 seconds in the quarter mile according to the onboard. That is impressive. That's really, really impressive. My final run yields a sub 2 second 0 to 60, 4 dead to 100, and the quarter in 9.026. Not even the engineers could break into the 8s today, so that's about all it's got. It's enough, more than enough. Okay, so now we know the ZR1X is faster around a track and even faster up a drag strip. But now we've come to the road, and as is tradition lately, it's pouring with rain. But we're going to still enjoy it anyway. So this is our road car. It's on the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. This has got the optional carbon wheels, but we still have the ZTK high aero package. So you can have this car touring spec, I guess, without the wing. That's when you get the top speed, 233 miles an hour. This will knock about 9 miles an hour off. When they did that top speed, by the way, they allow the car in 7th gear to rev 100 RPM more, so 8,100 RPM to get that 233 that they did with the ZR1. So yeah, big spoiler at the rear, and then at the front, you get this big carbon fiber flick here, and then big old dive planes. Even so, this isn't really a downforce car, 545 kilos, but that's at VMAX, so well over 220 miles an hour. Nothing like a GT3 RS, for example. It's a big heavy car as well, 115 kilos more than ZR1, so you're probably looking 1780 dry, which makes it a couple of hundred kilos more than 849 Testarossa, probably similar to a Lamborghini Revuelto actually. But anyway, let's get out on the incredibly slippy, miserable, foggy grey roads, find out what 1250 horsepower and a wet surface feels like. Okay, so on the track you get the black and white, don't you? The absolute maximum capability of this car, which is, as we've already discovered, completely next level, out there, hypercar performance, no question whatsoever. But on the road, you get some of the colour, you get to start to fill in the blanks about the character of the car. And for the most part, it's all good news for the ZR1X. There are some obvious differences. I'm going to have to speak about this car in the context of cars that are priced way beyond it, so forgive me for that, but it operates in that level. So there's no point me talking about this as compared to other $200,000 cars, because it's so far beyond them in terms of performance, what it's capable of. So it doesn't feel as special, and of course it doesn't, as something like an 849 Testarossa or a 750S. The driving position, just the feeling and fizz that comes back through the car is different. It feels bigger. It's not as special as an environment. There's a bit more damping to everything, and I think that probably speaks to the weight of the car. You notice it feels tangibly heavier than a supercar, like even the 849 Testarossa, which is quite a heavy thing, but definitely compared to like a 296 or a 750S. What you don't get is that incredible sharpness and sense of agility that you would in, let's say, a GT3 RS. You don't get that instant snap and feel and feedback. The flip side of that, of course, is that this car works. Everything about it works. There's no real quirks to it. It feels incredibly usable. It rides pretty nicely on the road in track. It's stiff. It feels like it's got big old tyres and it's hunting around. But I'm in sport mode and it's absolutely fine. The engine is fantastic. It doesn't maybe have the sharpness of that normally aspirated engine in the Z06, but the power's so much that the drama comes from that, and it's got that big turbo rush that you don't get in many cars. The McLaren 750S definitely has it. The Testarossa doesn't. It's got massive shove to start with, but you don't get that monster turbo top end feel that you do in this car. And it's crazy to think the engine alone in this car, that LT7, has more power than the 849 Testarossa's complete powertrain. So that's the level of performance we're dealing with. I guess the best thing I can say about it is that it elevates everything to this incredible level without feeling hugely compromised because of it. We've tried it now on the track, the drag strip, and even on wet, narrow roads. It seems to just work in every environment, and that is really a testament to the level of detail they've gone to, the lengths they've gone to in the car's development. One thing I do want to say is that since I've been doing this job, Corvette and Cadillac have been trying to break Europe. Like every 5 or 6 years, it feels like they want to break Europe. Well, this, I think, is the car to do it, but only if they do it right. Price the car like they do in the US. I just think it can't be ignored, and it builds that cult following and gives it a foothold at a place that it's been developed, you know, and I know it's a tiny consideration, but I would love to turn up to the Nürburgring, to Spa, to Silverstone, and there'd be some ZR1s or ZR1Xs scaring the crap out of the many, many GT3 and GT3 RS owners. I mean, as a value proposition, there's nothing like it. Literally nothing like it. Even setting aside the insane bang per buck the ZR1X offers, it's a seriously tasty car. On circuit, it is stupidly fast. For example, it laps Sonoma quicker than the recent Zinger 21C hypercar record, but it's also easy to handle. On the drag strip, it's untouchable by all but monster EVs, and on a rainy road, it combines usability with just the right amount of fear to feel special. It might not make you tingle like the most extreme supercars, but it's close enough. And when you blow past them on track, you probably won't care.